For centuries, the story of Russia begins with a single, massive geographic problem. The nation is isolated, impossibly large, and historically viewed by its own leaders as constantly lagging behind the civilized societies of Western Europe. Historians and politicians frequently point to two specific periods to explain this perceived backwardness: the 200-year Mongol occupation and centuries of peasant serfdom. Living between the East and the West created a lingering cultural anxiety. As author Fyodor Dostoevsky noted in the 19th century, "In Europe we are Tatars, but in Asia we too are Europeans." The conventional narrative paints the Mongols as mindless, brutal oppressors who stalled development, and the serf system as a rigid form of primitive slavery that trapped the economy in the Dark Ages. However, modern archaeological work and newly analyzed district-level tax records reveal a drastically different picture. The data shows these two institutions were highly organized engines of economic growth and political stability. The standard history of the Russian Empire is largely a politically motivated cover-up, designed to hide the actual mechanisms that built the state. Take the Mongol occupation. Look closely at this historical record detailing the Great Yasa, the customary Mongol laws. The Mongols operated under a strict legal code that guaranteed religious freedom for their subjects and granted diplomatic immunity to foreign envoys. When they conquered the Russian principalities, they did not wipe out the local governments. They operated as absentee landlords, allowing Russian princes to retain their titles and practice Orthodox Christianity in exchange for a 10% tax on their wealth. As we can see in these historical accounts, the Golden Horde managed this vast taxation and military network from their capital of Sarai, relying heavily on a specific middleman. A Russian noble granted the title Grand Prince of Vladimir. The Mongols consistently awarded this immensely lucrative position to the princes of Moscow. By collecting taxes for the horde and suppressing rival cities, Moscow amassed wealth and rapidly absorbed surrounding territories. The Mongol occupation provided the exact administrative framework, taxation methods, and centralized military organization that allowed warring princes to merge into a single, unified autocracy. Despite the lucrative cooperation between the princes and the khans, the Russian Orthodox Church vehemently opposed the Mongols. They viewed their rulers as pagans and infidels, and actively campaigned to sever Russia's cultural ties to the East. This text highlights what historians call an ideology of silence. Church clerics writing official documents, like the Niconian Chronicle, deliberately omitted any record of pragmatic cooperation or positive cultural exchange with the Mongols. This erasure accelerated in the 17th century. Tsar Peter the Great instituted aggressive Westernization policies, forcing subjects to adopt European dress and customs, fostering a deep embarrassment over the nation's Asian heritage. Centuries later, the Soviet state took this paranoia to a lethal extreme. In the 1930s, Joseph Stalin viewed the historical glorification of Genghis Khan as a direct threat to his own cult of personality. He ordered the execution of over 30,000 Mongols, specifically targeting scholars, linguists, and anyone believed to carry the Khan's bloodline. The myth of the savage, primitive Asian invader served as a political necessity for leaders determined to present Russia as a modern European power. A similar fiction surrounds the Russian peasant. Standard history teaches that serfdom was a rigid system of labor that trapped the country in economic darkness. But look at the 1858 tax census data shown here. By the time of emancipation, privately owned serfs actually made up a minority of the peasant population, about 36%. The majority were state peasants, living on land administered by the government with entirely distinct legal and economic rights. Even among private serfs, the institution adapted based on geography. In the fertile Black Earth regions of the South, landlords operated heavy agricultural estates, requiring direct, intense physical labor from the peasants. In the northern and central provinces, where soil was poor, landlords used the obrok, or quit-rent system. They issued travel passes, allowing serfs to leave the estate, engage in trade, and work in urban factories, sending cash back to the owner. Serfdom functioned as a highly varied, incredibly mobile, and geographically responsive tool for early industrialization across a massive landscape. When a government replaces empirical reality with a manufactured history, it loses the ability to understand its own country. Any attempts at reform operate on false data. The Emancipation of 1861 failed because lawmakers ignored the complex realities of the peasant population. They applied sweeping, uneven land reforms that saddled former private serfs with crushing redemption payments, while giving state peasants significantly better deals. This policy created staggering geographic inequality. Millions of rural workers were plunged into debt and stripped of land access, fueling the mass economic outrage that exploded into the revolutions of 1905 and 1917. The historical tragedies of the Russian state stem from a persistent denial of its own internal mechanics. Desperate to project a civilized, European image to the rest of the world, Russian leaders systemically erased the specific organizational tools, from Mongol taxation frameworks to the mobile serf communes, that actually held their massive Eurasian empire together.